the talent landscape is choppy water. I mean, there's layoffs, there's a lot of people being hired, and then there's a lot of wait and see where we're not hiring and we're just waiting to see.
And welcome everyone to Slater Pod. Today on the podcast, we welcome Charles Campbell. So Charles, the founder and president of TBO, they provide services in localization, game testing, training, and talent services with a newish company that started, TBO Talent. Hi, Charles, and thanks so much for joining today.
Hi, Florian. How are you doing? It's great to be on this call.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining. So where does this podcast find you today? We always ask that. What country? What city?
Yeah, well, strangely enough, I'm at home in the Republic of Cordoba in Argentina. I say the Republic of Cordoba, it's not an independent country actually, but we feel like we're a country within a country here in Cordoba, Argentina.
Ah, wow. Is that a recent feeling, or has that always been the case?
They used to call Cordoba an island within the country about 30 years ago, and politically the province of Cordoba is a little bit further to the right of what the general national politics are. But it's just a joke. I mean, Cordoba is very export focused. The city where I live has 1.5 million people, and a lot of businesses are focused on global markets. It's a very globalized local economy.
So have recent developments with Milei, have they been kind of good for or different from kind of how it's been for the on a national level, or you barely felt it?
Well, definitely nobody could say they barely felt Milei, because our new president is extremely determined to achieve results, and he was elected with 57% of the vote, so he has a popular mandate. Very theoretical guy, very little experience in politics, and he's trying to steamroll through a lot of changes, and I don't think anyone can say they haven't felt it yet. For now, the local economy is hurting as he's readjusting things, and people, I think, across the board are hurting. But the I guess medium and long term expectation is that we will pull through, and that significant changes will be made. In terms of our business, I mean, we're a globalized business, and we're very optimistic at all times, and we're expecting a good, healthy year. I wouldn't say a record year, but a healthy year, and we're working hard. And, AI, technology, globalization, all sorts of changes happening around the world. So the local politics is not the most significant driver for us in terms of determining business mood. But I will say it's got the country in a flurry, put it that way. And whether or not he will be successful, as the English would say, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, it could go either way. He could be a phenomenal success or a phenomenal failure at this point. It's the jury's out.
Because you'd be considered an export business, I'd assume. I would assume that your kind of client footprint domestically is rather small, and you're, very much exposed to global markets. So you're, in a sense, an exporter.
Yes, and that is exactly true. And the previous Argentinian governments, for a very long time, put in currency controls and all sorts of different mechanisms, some of them almost Cuban-like in their implementation, that made business progressively more difficult for local language service providers, and local language service providers became experts, absolute experts in navigating this mutating, I wouldn't say evolving, I would say mutating government regulations. And basically got to the point where I would laugh it off and say, if you can make it in Argentina, you can make it anywhere. And the current government has not dismantled those currency regulations yet, although the discourse is certainly that they will, but they haven't said when. So, fingers crossed.
That was also fuera as well, like all the other stuff that I saw Milei doing online. So apparently not that one.
Well, yeah, the guy's, bigger mouth than action. I'm sure that rings home with other politicians around the world. he talks a lot, but he hasn't actually done it yet. But he's only been in power for 6 months. So, as I said, the proof's in the pudding. Jury's out. We'll have to wait and see. For now, we're still struggling with the ridiculous currency controls and, whatever. But, business is good. Can't complain.
So what got you to Argentina and into the language industry? Let's look a little bit at your background.
About 35 years ago, my mother decided to dump me at the house of some friends of ours who were Chileans living in New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand. So she dumped me with these Chileans for 3 weeks so she could go hiking around the volcanoes of Hawaii. I had a wonderful time with the Chilean family, speaking Spanish with them and eating Chilean food in New Zealand. It was a totally Chilean way of life within a New Zealand household, and I loved it. So I had traveled my whole life with my father in the U.S., my mother in New Zealand. I was a well-traveled kid, and living with these Chileans for 3 weeks while my mother was on an esoterical adventure in Hawaii gave me a feeling for Latin America. So I registered to do a student exchange, and you had to choose a couple of countries. I chose Argentina and Chile. So I ended up in Argentina in a small town. Long story short, that is where I met the mother of my first 3 of my 4 children, and was married for a very long time, longer than I can remember. And that's what brought me to Argentina. And then at the end of the 1990s, thinking about what I said about an export-oriented economy, the local economy was very unreliable, very up and down. And before it became fashionable to do so, I set up a language service provider focused on exporting translation. So we're talking in the year 2000 approximately. And that evolved to what was later translation back office and then TBO over time. Why did I do that? Because Cordoba had great fiber optic internet connections for the 1990s, great hospitals, great airport, and most importantly of all, great local universities. Either the public government funded universities are free. I mean, nothing's free, but free for the students. Taxpayers fund it. Very demanding academically speaking. So 5-year university degrees, very demanding. I felt like my degree in New Zealand was like a walk in the park compared to what these guys were doing here in Cordoba. Facilities, quite run down, but in terms of the teaching quality and the academic level is very, very good. And the private universities are very affordable. I mean, by American standards, it would make you laugh, or I don't know, in Switzerland. But so that was the main reason. The universities, the talent pool, which I think links back to the central theme of this call today. So that's why I started TBO in Cordoba. We branched out over the years. We opened up an office in Peru in 2011, Ukraine and Vietnam in 2017 and 2018, Mexico last year. So a total of, Argentina, Peru, Mexico, Ukraine, and Vietnam. The newest office is in Mexico. And that is because of nearshoring from the United States. Mexico is geopolitically hot, even though they have a government that's difficult to decipher. It's good for business, and American investment is pouring into Mexico as American investment kind of cools a bit on China. You only have to cool a little bit on China to make a huge impact on other countries, because Mexico, only has 1/10 of the population of China or less. Why Vietnam? Well, Vietnam was to provide a service, global service, to have an Asian connection. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful team in Vietnam. Ukraine was to do the same from Eastern Europe. We originally had an office. Don't have an office anymore because a bomb fell right in front of the office. It was in downtown Kiev. So we kind of moved everybody out originally to Grandma's farmhouse and all sorts of different options, now more stable, but we distributed the team out rather than being at one central office. I'm really excited to say I'm going to Kiev literally just booked my tickets. I'm going to Kiev between SlaterCon and LockWorld. In 1 month's time, I'll be there and I'll tell you how it is from Kiev.
How do you go to Kiev now? Like you have to go to Poland and take the train, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of research on that because I have a really tight schedule between SlaterCon and the French Open in Paris and LockWorld. So what I do is I fly to Warsaw from Paris, and then you can take a bus. Not sure how far the seats go back on the bus, but it's got Wi-Fi. It's like 15 hours if there's no problems on the border. Or you can take a train, which is anywhere between 13 and 17 hours, and it has like sleeper bunks, like straight out of the movies, the old movies. So I'm looking for it. I think I'm taking the bus to Kiev, and then I'm taking the train back. It's going to be exciting. The reason why you can't fly, of course, is because there is a very serious risk that an airliner could be shot down. And that has happened in the past. So that's why there's no flights. But we've had team members from our team in Ukraine come in and out by bus and train in the past, and it's been pretty seamless.
Well, all the best with that. It'll be great to see the team. So talking about team, it feels, at least to me, kind of recently or maybe a year ago, launched a new brand. Is that correct? Or a new company called TBO Talent. I want to talk a bit about that, how you kind of started that, why you started that, and then also want to hear your thoughts on the talent landscape as we're in 2024, right? I mean, what roles are currently like in high demand? What's happening there? There's been a lot of, some layoffs on the tech side, but like also translators being insecure. There's just so many moving parts. So big question. Over to you.
The talent landscape is choppy water. I mean, there's layoffs. There's a lot of people being hired. And then there's a lot of wait and see where we're not hiring and we're just waiting to see. My impression is that there's no reason to be concerned. That I do believe that there are jobs out there for everyone, not necessarily exactly the job that you would want, but this is a kind of a flux period, a transition period, coming from a really hot, overheated economy where nobody could find people and workers could, ask the earth and get it, or jump from one company to another 2 or 3 times in a year, back to, putting feet back on the ground. I still believe it's a near full employment for our industry, or even full employment. The only people who are unemployed are people who are momentarily moving from one company to another. I don't think there's any kind of systemic issue of lack of opportunities in our industry. Talent is not easy to find anywhere except in locations where you might not necessarily want talent or need it for whatever geopolitical reasons or security reasons. For example, I get a lot of resumes from Lebanon or Pakistan, which is not a place where I could think about establishing a facility or confidently hiring remotely. I also get resumes from India offering Swedish, Japanese, and German translations that don't, provide me with a degree of security or confidence that would enable me to move forward there either. But generally speaking, in terms of Latin America, Argentina, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, resources are, we find them because we have an extraordinary reach, deep local roots, 20 plus years of experience in every Latin American country. We also have a lot of deep experience in Eastern Europe and in Southeast Asia because of our local offices there. So I don't think it's easy. It's not a walk in the park, but it's definitely not the overheated economy we had coming out of the pandemic where everyone was, high on the wave. You've got to work for growth at the moment, and workers have got to work for opportunities, and employers have got to work to find workers, and so forth. It's, there's no rising tide, it seems to me. Now, in terms of tech in particular, that is where I see a lot of demand in terms of skill sets. Also, life sciences never seems to go away, a very persistent need for life sciences skills. And general localization, I think, is also still there and it's still growing. What I would see is from the trends that I see from talking to many different employers that we work with in many different countries is that they do want people to be flexible. So if you get hired for a role and that role evolves, run with it. It's not a time to be overly picky or overly pretentious about being too rigid with your job description. That's not a universal recommendation on my part, but it's definitely something I've observed, that employers are wanting you to be flexible. And anyone who is AI phobic may be unnecessarily being so, because everyone's saying AI with everything. It's a ham and cheese AI sandwich. AI is being put into everything, and two companies will merge and they say they're creating an AI powerhouse, and you don't necessarily know if either of them really knows anything about AI. And I think that's also coming down to earth a bit. But I think on the talent side, talent, i.e. workers, perhaps need to, simmer down on if an employer mentions AI, it doesn't mean that you need to earn double if they don't mention AI. And if they mention AI, you don't need to freak out that you're suddenly not going to be a linguist anymore, or you're not going to be a quality manager anymore, or a project manager anymore, and you're going to be doing prompt engineering all day long. So, lots of irons and lots of different fires, I think, for employers and for talent. And it's still a very positive market. I mean, I've lived through periods of recession when unemployment shot up and everybody knew somebody who lost a job, and that is not the reality today. If you lose your job today, I think you're very well positioned to get another job very quickly.
With TBO Talent, do you guys staff? Do you guys headhunt both, or like what's the focus there?
So we've been providing talent to the translation, interpreting, and localization industry since 2003. That's when we first placed the first project manager with the first client. And the service that we provide is not recruitment per se. We do recruitment from time to time, but there are other people out there, I believe, that have more experience in recruitment as a standalone service. What we provide is what we used to call managed services, but now we call talent, which is an ongoing service where we provide our clients with talent in any number of different job descriptions. Last count, there were almost 50 different job descriptions. So the full spectrum of quality positions, customer service positions, project management positions, program management positions, talent management positions, engineering positions, and just grows and grows. Sales positions, and so forth. And now we're seeing more and more positions come up that you never even heard of 2 years ago. But it all started out with project managers, and that was certainly our forte for a very long time before things diversified. And what we were doing at the time, way back in 2004, 2003, was to provide project managers to language service providers in the United States or the United Kingdom to start with, and then Canada, and then it just kept growing into other countries. To manage their projects. And we would literally have clients that did not have an operational structure in their country of operation. They had a sales structure, and they would outsource basically the entire operational structure to us. So a vendor manager, project manager, whatever, and so forth. And this grew and grew and grew. And we have clients that literally hire us for one person. And we have a couple of clients that hire us to something like 70, 80 people. So this has evolved and over time, and we've come to navigate many different issues that arise in the markets where we operate. We're talking about Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. They're all emerging markets. We were going to go in a to Africa as well. I went to Tanzania right before the pandemic, like 3 weeks before the pandemic. And unfortunately, the pandemic cut that off, and we never really got back to it. But still got a great resource base there, but didn't actually get the office on the ground. And what we're doing is providing an ongoing service. So if the talent that we provide has a medical issue, whether that be physical or mental, spiritual, existential, there's a lot going on in people's heads and bodies. We replace that person at no cost to our client, and we provide the person in almost all cases with support to overcome whatever issue they're facing. One of the central themes behind this is that a lot of our customers are in the US, where customers in the US where employers are not used to carrying people when they have some kind of medical issue, mental health, physical health, maternity leave. So this is like a non-issue in most of the world, but in the US, it's a big issue. And so what we generally do is we bridge the gap by providing more benefits than what our clients would provide. And what that does is it creates a very long standing loyalty between us and the talents that we work with. Also, the US and the UK have a reputation for being very quick to hire and also quick to fire. And people in emerging markets, so I'm talking, Ukraine and the countries around Ukraine, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, and also in Vietnam, they're used to a more long-term, we could call it French-style approach to employment, or German style, where when things get rough, employers tend to try and moderate the impact of the peaks and valleys on workers and on clients, and can often carry people through crises, reassign them to other jobs and so forth. I'm generalizing here, but for workers working for an American client has a risk because they know that, Amazon can wake up and smell the coffee and fire 8,000 people in one day and create a ripple effect. Whereas I don't think you've heard of any French or German or Swiss companies firing quite in that dramatic manner. Maybe I'm misinformed, but there's a general feeling out there that American companies are quick to hire and quick to fire. So what we do there is we provide, it's not 100% guarantee, but it's basically 99%, that if we have talents that are working for an American client and that client, loses business or gets into some kind of financial turbulence or whatever and lets them go, and it's not related to performance, we can almost 99% guarantee that they will be recycled into another position with another client. So that represents a big value added for the talents. They feel security. And it's great. I personally love working in the talent business. And this is something that I have personally been very deeply involved in for the last 15 years, as it has grown and grown. I mean, literally today, the talent business at TBO Talent is getting close to being 57% of our overall business, with the other 43% being multilingual translation.
Quite the successful pivot there. Congrats. So when you look at these roles, we're talking about a lot about, obviously, 24 months now, it's AI. Do you see, give me maybe a couple examples of actually new AI related roles, that are in real demand, not like this kind of maybe, or some iteration of post editing. Can you give me a couple examples there? And then do you see very kind of differences between the vendor and the buyer side?
Well, new roles. Obviously, the existing roles are having the letters AI tacked onto them. So, you have a quality manager as an AI quality manager. Whether or not that actually involves a significant role change depends on the employer and how things go. But It's like 25 years ago, or maybe 30 years ago, people started changing from the word translation to localization, and everybody who was in localization was like, up on the pedestal. Um, and what was the difference? And a lot of people struggle to actually explain the difference. In this case, yeah, there is a very clear difference, and there's many different roles that are changing significantly. So you have obviously prompt engineering. You have a lot of quality assurance related roles that are being renamed. Things like graders, raters, evaluators, rather than being a more heavily linguistically oriented quality assurance manager who is an absolute expert in the language that they passionately feel about, that they study to work with so deeply and detailedly. Now, I think AI roles are often a little bit more aloof from the very specific love of language, and you're mixing love of language with love of technology. Not everybody can handle that. And some people feel that if you love a language, then you're somehow opposed to technology, which is silly. But that kind of mentality is out there. But I think that, and it's particularly, there's going to be a lot of creation of roles as well for engineering positions, and that translation, interpreting, and localization companies are going to need to beef up their engineering stuff, and that is definitely something that we at TBO are already noticing, and that may enable them to reposition themselves upstream, not as a technology provider per se, like I don't know, Plunet or XTM or technology companies, but as service companies that are extremely tech savvy. So I see a lot of that happening.
Now, there's been a ton of like process automation over the past, even since I've been in this industry 10, 15 years now. I mean, what about the project manager role that was kind of clearly defined maybe 10, 15, years ago? You get the job, you allocate it to the different linguists, you manage some of the TMS side. Like, how has that evolved over the past, let's say, 2 to 3 years, if at all? Have you seen a major shift there in just the general things that PMs do?
I mean, we're literally gone from sticky notes and Excel in the 1990s to either automated or semi-automated processes today. I think that automation today is more of a discussion about how automated you are rather than whether or not you are automated or not. I mean, if you're not automated, then you probably have if you're not automated in any way, then you have a choice, which is, I think, start automating to some degree or another without losing the essence of your value and your core business, your core service, without losing the human touch, or gradually wither on the vine. I don't see anyone like dying overnight, but I do see people plateauing because they are not willing to invest the time and sit down and get their heads around it. So I think project managers today, I mean, there's different companies with different degrees of automation. If you have, for example, systems like Plunet and Be Lazy, you interconnect them, that will semi-automate a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, it doesn't help if you tell your customer, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That was I don't know, it was my automation that did it." You're still responsible, and it's a tricky point to determine exactly how much of a human touch you want. But you certainly don't want to be typing in data that can be automatically uploaded. And I'm personally a very creative person in terms of writing emails, and I can talk for hours, as you're probably noticing right now. But a lot of people will sit there and stare at the screen when they have to write an email. And so a bit of AI would really help them write a quicker email. So I think if you're not automating, then you should be automating. It's up to you to how much you want to do. At TBO, we have a business unit. We have many different business units that we've created brands for, like TBO Talent, mean, TBO Talent is a brand, but the actual service has been around since 2004. We also have TBO Dev, which is our development division, and that is newer and it is growing. And TBO Dev's number one task is to develop and implement automation within TBO. And what we've noticed is that it has allowed us to grow at the same rate, i.e., fast, but headcount is not growing at the same rate. And it wouldn't be possible to continue to add headcount at the same rate. And that is because we're automating more and more, particularly in project management. And then the TBO Dev team is also looking at other areas of the company where the automations can be implemented. So we use external tools, but we also have our own in-house big nerd who understands all this stuff and is willing to pull things apart. And then, of course, there's someone like me where I'm a kind of creative person and not exactly the automation type, but I go with it. Don't resist, but I do add my own spice to the mix.
I want to talk a bit about another area that's gone really well for some LSPs in the past couple of years, or maybe 4 or 5 years, is like data annotation, language annotation, but other annotation stuff as well. Is that something that you've gone into as well? Usually the crowds had been in the past bigger, like the pools of freelancers. But yeah, it used to be, or it still is, like something that's quite natural for language service providers. Is that something you've gone into?
Well, to be 100% transparent with you, I think we kind of missed that wave. I mean, we provide that service, but it wasn't a game changer for us at TBO, just because you can't focus on everything simultaneously. You have to pick and choose what you want to invest your time and money in, and where your values are, and so forth. And data annotation took off big time a few years ago, and I think it's subsiding a bit now. And it wasn't a rock star moment for us. I mean, we've done it, but it wasn't our primary focus.
Now, you mentioned the different brands that you have. So you went through quite a kind of deep, at least from the outset, kind of deep rebranding process. I believe it was last year, 2023. That must have been challenging. So tell us a bit more about the primary challenges, lessons learned. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are maybe planning something similar and could need the help.
That's a really good question. Very, very interesting one too. So my personal email was talktocharles@translationbackoffice.com, which is like a 50-letter email. And in English, it's relatively easy to say talk to Charles at translationbackoffice.com, but in Spanish, it was absolute nightmare. And I would have to spell it out letter by letter. I was going crazy. My team had been pushing to rebrand the company to TBO for some time. When I say my team, my team is all younger than me. I'm like the veteran, 48, and a whole bunch of guys in their 20s and 30s, pushing to rejuvenate, simplify, refresh our image. So we changed to TBO. Unfortunately, there's a travel agency in India called TBO. So they have TBO.com. So we're TBO.group, which is great because we are a group of brands. And they presented to me the idea. This was a very much bottom-up process. I said, go for it, work on it, create a team, interdisciplinary team. So someone from graphic design, someone from sales, someone from marketing, someone from admin, and of course our COO, Alejandro Serfati. And they worked on it together, and they came back and presented to me the idea of creating sub-brands. So we have TBO Talent, TBO Dev, we have TBO Lab, which is our educational unit where we train young students that are looking for project management certification and so forth. We have several different units that are designed to reflect the focus of the company. And the focus of the company is translation, talent, training, teams, testing, and travel. The 6 T's. The travel is actually for me, but that's a joke. It's the 6 T's. So everything is about the T's at TBO. What does the T stand for? And of course, if our name was translation back office, but 57% of our business was not translation, the name was a hindrance. It's in the same way you had in the 1990s, people will call their company ABC Translation, because you would have the phone book and ABC would be at the beginning of the phone book, or people will call themselves 1-800 interpreting, because it was all about what you dialed on your phone. And of course, those are no longer relevant in today's world. So translation back office had become obsolete for us because we were providing so many different services. One of the biggest services we provide today, for example, is rolling out teams in different countries for our clients, whether or not that be Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, or Latin America. So clients reach out to us and ask us to create a team of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 people. And literally within 30 to 60 days, they roll out the job descriptions and we run with it. They also call us to create a one-person position. So, of course, that deployment of service and leverage of local footprint and knowledge was not in any way reflected by translation back office. So the name change was a simplification, a rejuvenation. Everyone got involved. I signed off. I fell in love with it about midway through. Wasn't initially enamored of the process, but then I went in big time, and it was a group effort, and it's still going on. We're in the process of redoing our main website now and rolling out different services. TBO Play, for example, is our games localization division, and so forth. So really exciting. And now it's kind of like impossible to think of translation back office. But this is kind of something that other companies have done as well. At some point in the past, it was considered to be good to have a really long name. Procter and Gamble, I don't know, Price Waterhouse Coopers. At one time, I think it was Price Waterhouse Coopers, Librand, or Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu. I mean, who even knows what KPMG stands for? It doesn't matter. Yeah. So there you go. That was our version.
I think your rebranding worked quite well. Also, you can still kind of the origins are still coming through with the TBO, so it does have a history to it, right? But it's short enough to add a lot of other stuff to it, like talent, lab, etc.
If we'd started out as TBO, maybe people would not have understood what we were about or what we were for. But because we started out as translation back office and we made a name for ourselves as translation back office, it wasn't too difficult to translate to TBO. I mean, does anyone remember what HBO stands for? It's home box office.
I did not know.
They didn't start out as HBO, or maybe they did. I mean, I was a kid, but you know what I mean? It worked out really well. And it's particularly good now because now we are launching some of the newer divisions like TBO Dev, TBO Play, and it would have been virtually impossible to do that under the translation back office name. And everyone was on board. Everyone contributed. It was great.
But it's a long process, right? So let's say an LSP is trying to do something similar. It probably does take half a year to a year, and then probably another year to like really kind of percolate through. And a lot of we need to also push the marketing side so people recognize it fairly quickly.
Well, yeah, and maybe in the past there was too much emphasis on the logo itself. I mean, some people do a rebrand because they have an old-looking logo, and if you're going to do a rebrand of the logo, why not do a rebrand of the name? There are a lot of companies in our industry that are like letters like ALC, ABC, ATC. There's so many things that are almost the same. The same happened, I think, with Juntos. Juntos is the organization that represents translation, interpreting, and localization companies in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm one of the founding members. I'm on the board. speak on behalf of Juntos at a lot of events. Juntos was originally the Association of Language Companies of Latin America and the Caribbean. We couldn't even remember our own name. It was ALC, ALS, or ALS, ALC. I literally had to look it up. And many times I got it wrong. And then we had a brainstorming event, and we said, what are we about? And we also had the challenge of Spanish and Portuguese, Latin America, Spanish, Portuguese. So juntos is spelled exactly the same way in Portuguese. It's juntos, it's just pronounced differently, which of course means together in English. And that's exactly what Juntos is about. It's about bringing people together from Latin America and the Caribbean and about having a voice. So unless you're Google, where you can blast the world with so many resources, and you can have a made-up name, I personally think it's better to have a name that means something, and that is a concept or is easy to remember. So that's why I like Translation Back Office, because we were the translation back office. That was our exact business model in the name. Now we're TBO, and the T means all those different things I mentioned. So for me, that has a meaning. I mean, if you have billions of marketing dollars, you can call yourself whatever. In Silicon Valley, if you don't have a silly sounding name, then you don't have a name. It's like you're going to be worth more if you're called something silly than if you're called something sensible, just because it's cool to make up a made up word. But that's cool. It's different for each company.
All right. So now it's SlaterCon, French Open, Kiev, and LocWorld. And then what else is on the map for 2024?
I've been at home here in the Republic of Cordoba for about 5 weeks. It's like, oh my gosh, getting restless. The suitcases are gathering dust. So I went to the ALC Unconference in February in Mexico, and that was great. And then I went to Juntos in Lima, Peru, where there were 150 people attending, up from 56 in Rio de Janeiro the year before. Next year's going to be Mexico City in March 15, 2025. And then after Juntos, I just stayed home. Family, end of summer here in Argentina. A lot of work to be done. But next, I'm going to Uruguay next week. Uruguay is just next to Argentina. It's our little South American Switzerland. And then I'm going to Buenos Aires for a Lock Drinks event. Never one to miss a drink. And then I will be back here in Cordoba for a couple of weeks, and then I will be in London for SlaterCon. Very excited to be attending. Never attended before. We'll be exhibiting too. And then some time off. I'm traveling with my daughter, who's 13, and my mother, who's 81. And we are going to reconnect in London with my mother's long-lost sister, from whom she was separated at birth. I mean, that is a story. So I'll let you know how that goes, because these two old ladies look exactly the same, except my mother has a New Zealand accent and her sister has a British accent. So it's very, very interesting. I'm going to write a book about it. I'm not going to write a book about the language industry because I've signed too many NDAs, but I'll write a book about my mother meeting her long-lost sister. Then the French Open, then Kiev, then LocWorld, then home, 10 days, and then I'm going to the Brazilian BLIS conference in Rio de Janeiro for the Brazilian Language Industry Association, where I'll be speaking. And then, gosh, that's all that's on the horizon for now. But I'm sure I'll be at other events in North America, LocWorld in Monterey, maybe SlaterCon as well in the US later in the year, ALC in Montreal.
If you want to double dip, we're in Menlo Park on September 5th.
What a great location. That sounds like a good deal. TBO has a lot of clients in the Bay Area, California in general, and I lived in Sausalito when I was a kid. Like, we're talking the 1980s, when you could actually buy a house for $300,000, believe it or not. Now you go buy a tree for $300,000. When I lived in Sausalito, yeah, that was cool. So I love going back there. I'm sure I'll be there too.
All right. Well, it was great talking to you today, Charles.
I really enjoyed it myself, and thank you for reaching out and providing me with this opportunity. As you can see, I'm quite a talker. Could have gone for a couple of more hours if you let me.
All right. Thanks so much, Charles.